The Defense Dispatch.
You're nothing but a crawfish-eating backwoods hillbilly who bought his law degree at some Louisiana flea market. Alexandria. Ocasio-Cortez's voice cut through the Senate hearing room with the unwavering confidence of someone who's never lost a Twitter argument. Her phone, broadcasting live to 2.8 million Instagram followers, caught every second as she stood at the witness table, pointing directly at Senator John Kennedy. The 73-year-old senator from Louisiana glanced up from his yellow legal pad, where he'd been doodling what looked like a duck, or maybe a crawfish. Behind his thick reading glasses, his eyes sparkled with what could have been a hint of amusement. "Your generation wrecked our planet while you were busy counting your oil money," AOC continued, playing straight to her online fans. "And now you sit here pretending to be some humble country lawyer, when you're really just another fossil fuel puppet." Kennedy slowly set his pencil down and opened a slim manila folder labeled AOC Ethics Review. "Congresswoman," he said softly, his Louisiana drawl as thick as molasses, "I sure do appreciate you taking time out of your hectic schedule to school us simple folk." "That's awfully kind of you. Now, since we're on the subject of destroying the world and all, I was hoping you might help me wrap my head around something. You know, just a little bit of basic math regarding your Green New Deal. Oh, and maybe you could explain these receipts I came across." That smile never left his face, but something in his voice caused AOC's cocky grin to waver for just a split second. What followed would derail a political career, launch 1,000 memes, and coin a brand new term in Washington: getting Kennedy'd. This is that story. The hearing room was buzzing with tension as AOC kept her live stream running for her 2.8 million followers. Behind her, young staffers decked out in Green New Deal shirts packed the gallery. Their phones were held high like weapons. "This Louisiana relic is about to find out what happens when you mess with the squad," she declared, zooming the camera in on Kennedy's rumpled figure. The 73-year-old senator was busy doodling on a yellow legal pad, seemingly completely unaware. Chairman Graham banged his gavel for order. "Today, we will hear testimony on the Green Energy Transition Act." Representative Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, angled herself perfectly for the lens. "Before I start, let's take a look at Senator Kennedy. He's pocketed $2 million from big oil. He's voted against every single climate bill. He represents everything that's broken in Washington." Kennedy glanced up with a mild expression. $2 million? Let me just check my bank account real quick. Nope, still can't afford the premium coffee. I must have left it in my other pair of pants. The gallery erupted in laughter at what they took for a desperate joke. AOC just smirked. "This is exactly what we're up against, everyone. A man who cracks jokes while our planet is on fire." "Oh, I take climate change plenty seriously," Kennedy replied, never stopping his doodling. "Just like I take your Green New Deal seriously." Speaking of which, he produced a slim folder labeled AOC Ethics Review. "I've got a few questions here. Just some simple math. Do you think you could help this old hillbilly make sense of it?" AOC leaned back with total confidence. "Go right ahead and educate me, Senator. Though I doubt your big oil donors will be fans of the answer." Kennedy beamed, wearing the look of a prosecutor who just heard a full confession. "Well, let's get started then. I sometimes get a bit mixed up about who's teaching whom, but I'm sure that won't be an issue for someone as brilliant as you." The veteran reporters in the room traded knowing looks. Whenever Kennedy brought up simple math, you knew someone was about to be dismantled. The trap was laid. The prey had swallowed the bait whole. Kennedy fumbled around with his reading glasses, dropping them once and apologizing over and over. AOC's live stream audience loved it, with comments pouring in about Grandpa needing a nap or checking to see if he was having a stroke. She flashed a smirk at the lens, completely sure of her dominance. "Now, Congresswoman," Kennedy began, his voice carrying that signature Louisiana drawl that city folk always confuse for a lack of wit. "I've been trying my best to wrap my head around this Green New Deal of yours. It sounds absolutely lovely. Jobs for every single person. Fresh air and saving all those polar bears. I mean, who doesn't love a polar bear? They're magnificent creatures, though I've personally never laid eyes on one. Have you?" AOC's eye roll was so dramatic you could almost hear it. "Senator, while you're off rambling about zoo animals, the world is literally on fire. The Green New Deal is a comprehensive—" "Oh, I know it's comprehensive," Kennedy broke in softly, sliding a document across. "Deeply comprehensive. Matter of fact, I have a copy of it right here. All 14 pages of it. That is truly impressive. Imagine 14 whole pages to completely overhaul the entire American economy. Heck, the manual for my coffee maker is thicker than that." A wave of laughter rippled through the gallery. AOC's supporters tried to kick off a "let her speak" chant, but it quickly died down. But here's the part that really stumps me. Kennedy went back to adjusting his glasses once more. "And you'll have to excuse me if this sounds like a silly question. We're really looking at this as a way to overhaul the entire economy, aren't we?" He glanced up from the document. "Transforming the whole economy, not just saving the environment. Changing the economy." "That sounds less like climate policy and more like, well, what's the term I'm looking for? Ah, that's right, socialism. Democratic socialism," AOC interjected sharply. "Ah, of course. Democratic socialism." Kennedy gave a slow nod. "That's a bit like calling it a democratic bank robbery. You still lose every cent. But hey, at least you got a chance to vote on the matter." A wave of uneasy laughter rippled through the room. AOC's Instagram Live numbers were beginning to tank. The comments section was turning from praise to doubt. Kennedy pulled one last sheet from the first section of his file. "But let's discuss how this actually hits regular people. Not the folks on Instagram or Twitter, but the ones working for a living. Based on this report from the American Action Forum, and unlike your 14-page dream journal, they actually show their math. The Green New Deal would cost every American household roughly $600,000 over the next decade." He looked at AOC over the rim of his glasses. "That comes out to $60,000 a year for every single home. The average household income in this country is about $67,000. You're asking families to hand over nearly every penny they earn just to fund your climate vision. That leaves them with maybe $7,000 to survive on for the entire year. How exactly is that supposed to work? We never suggested that families would be paying out of pocket." AOC stammered. "Oh, so it's all free then?" Kennedy asked with mock curiosity. "Like those free cookie samples at the supermarket?" "No, ma'am. Somebody always picks up the tab, whether it's through taxes, inflation, or cutting services. There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Even a simple country lawyer like me understands that." He snapped the first part of his folder shut with authority. "You know, Congresswoman, where I'm from, we say you can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, no matter how much mayonnaise you stir in. Your Green New Deal is a whole lot of mayo, but the math underneath just doesn't add up. And speaking of things that aren't adding up," he continued, flipping to the second section of his file, "let's dive into your campaign finances. You seem deeply concerned about money in the political system. You call it dark money, The bad stuff. The evil business. So I'm sure you won't mind clarifying some of these peculiar financial setups we've come across. AOC's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Her team was waving her down frantically from the back of the room. Her Instagram Live audience had plummeted under 2 million and was still dropping. She was backed into a corner. Leaving now would look like a total surrender. Staying meant facing whatever else Kennedy had tucked away in that folder. She white-knuckled the edge of the table, trying to fake a confidence she'd lost. "I've got nothing to hide, Senator, which is more than I can say for you and your oil industry donors." Kennedy gave a faint smile, looking like a grandmaster who had just spotted checkmate 6 moves ahead. "Oil donors? Oh, we'll get to the donors. But first, I want to talk about the Justice Democrats PAC, Brand New Congress LLC, and something called... Now, what was it again? Ah, yes, strategic consulting. Truly fascinating business. It really opened my eye to the way modern politics is played these days. He licked his thumb and turned the page with the slow, steady pace of a man with nowhere else to be, and a captive audience. Shall we get started? Kennedy took his sweet time organizing the papers in his second folder, occasionally peeking up at AOC like a scientist studying a bug under a microscope. The room felt like a courtroom right before a witness gets torn apart on the stand. "Now then, Congresswoman," he began, his voice taking on that gentle softness that had blindsided so many before. "You talk a great deal about getting the money out of politics. You call it dark money, the poison in our democracy. The evil business that corrupts the system. I couldn't agree with you more. Money in politics is like kudzu. Once it gets a grip, it's nearly impossible to rip out." AOC sat up straighter, looking for a way to get back on the offensive. "Precisely, Senator. That's why I refuse to take a dime of corporate PAC money. My campaign is entirely grassroots funded." "Grassroots," Kennedy echoed with apparent delight. "What a charming word. Reminds me of home, just watching the grass grow by the bayou. Of course, sometimes what looks like a lawn is actually just weeds. Maybe they're just weeds, or sometimes folks just paint the dirt green and call it grass." He pulled out a sheet packed with tiny font and legal jargon. "Speaking of painting things green, let's look at your grassroots operation. It says here you brought in $4.6 million during your first run. That's pretty impressive for a former bartender. Don't get me wrong, bartending is good, honest work. I used to mix a mean mint julep myself back in the day. The people believed in my message." AOC spoke up. "Oh, I have no doubt they did," Kennedy replied warmly. "But which specific people are we talking about? See, I have these Federal Election Commission reports right here, and they tell quite a fascinating story. Your campaign dropped about $20,000 on an outfit called Brand New Congress LLC for strategic consulting. That is a pretty fuzzy term, sort of like calling a skunk a striped kitty." He adjusted his reading glasses, peering closely at the fine print. "But then I spotted something rather peculiar. Your chief of staff, Mr. Chuck Chakrabarty, the millionaire socialist. He's the one who founded Brand New Congress LLC. He also happened to start the Justice Democrats PAC. And wouldn't you know it, both of those organizations were funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars right back to Brand New Congress LLC. It's like a financial merry-go-round, except instead of painted horses, it's spinning nothing but dollar signs." AOC's self-assured expression started to crumble. Those organizations were instrumental in getting progressives elected all across the country. "Oh, is that so?" Kennedy produced a chart that looked like a spiderweb sketched by someone with way too much caffeine and free time. Let me see if this old mind of mine can actually follow the money. The Justice Democrats PAC brought in the funds. Then they handed that money over to Brand New Congress, LLC. Brand New Congress, LLC then turned around and provided services to your campaign at way below market value. That's like me giving you $100, you giving it to your cousin, and then your cousin buying you a $100 gift. Except in this case, we're talking about 885,000. A wave of gasps rippled through the hearing room. A few reporters were frantically tapping away on their smartphones. But hold on, Kennedy went on, clearly having a great time. It actually gets even better. According to these emails we obtained through official FOI channels, totally legal and legitimate, Mr. Chakrabarty wrote, "We established Brand New Congress, LLC to bypass FEC regulations. It's technically within the law, but it's for sure in the gray area." He glanced up at AOC with a look of fake concern. A gray area, you say? That's like saying you're just a little bit pregnant or mostly telling the truth. You're either playing by the rules or you're breaking them. There aren't many shadows when things are supposed to be black and white. Those emails are being taken way out of context, AOC fired back, her voice getting higher and sharper. Context, Kennedy repeated to himself. There's that favorite word again. All right then, let's throw in a little more context. He reached for another email. This one was sent from you directly to Mr. Chakrabarty. Make sure those FEC filings look spotless. We can't risk another investigation like the one back in 2018. Another investigation, huh? Now, what was that all about? AOC's face shifted from bright red to a ghostly pale. Her phone kept vibrating with alerts as her staff scrambled to handle the fallout on social media. Ah, here we go, Kennedy noted, pulling out yet another paper. As it turns out, you were under investigation for possibly illegal coordination between your campaign and the Justice Democrats PAC. The FEC was split right down party lines, so no formal charges ever came down. But the Republican commissioners did write something interesting. They said there was solid evidence of illegal coordination. They just didn't have the votes to move forward. That's only because it was a partisan witch hunt, AOC snapped back. A witch hunt, Kennedy echoed with a thoughtful look. It's funny how investigations are always witch hunts when you're the target, but speaking truth to power when they're about someone else. It reminds me of my grandson looking at his report card. If he gets an A, he thinks he's a genius. But if he gets an F, it's because the teacher's being unfair. He brought out one more set of files. But let's get to the part I like best. Your campaign records show payments made to a Mr. Riley Roberts. That's your boyfriend, correct? Paid for marketing services? To the tune of $6,000. Now, I'm not here to judge anyone. My own wife helps me out with my campaigns, too. But here's the strange part. Mr. Roberts wasn't actually listed as a paid employee anywhere until right after a formal complaint was lodged. Riley did real, legitimate work. I'm sure he did. Kennedy nodded in agreement. Still, it's curious that you've told the public he doesn't work for your campaign at all. In fact, you got pretty worked up whenever anyone suggested otherwise. You even called it a conspiracy theory. Yet, here are the FEC filings showing clear payments. Is an official FEC report a conspiracy theory now, too? Because if it is, you're looking at a federal crime. Filing fake conspiracy theories with the government usually doesn't go over too well. Kennedy then pulled out a picture, a quick snap from Instagram. Speaking of Mr. Roberts, here's a shot from the Met Gala. What a stunning couple! And that dress with "Tax the Rich" written right on it. It's a very powerful statement. We'll circle back to that in just a second. But first, I spotted something else interesting in your financial disclosure forms. He brought up another document. Your campaign paid out $3,700 to a fellow named Juan D. Gonzalez for training. Then there was another $850 paid to the Bombazo Dance Company, also labeled as training. So, what kind of training was this, exactly? Because I took a look at the Bombazo Dance Company. They're in the business of teaching salsa dancing. A wave of whispers broke out across the room. Even a few Democrats on the committee were leaning in, clearly intrigued. Now, I'm all for professional development, Kennedy went on. I actually took a square dancing class once. I was awful at it. I kept stomping on my partner's toes, but at least I paid for that lesson out of my own pocket. It never crossed my mind to bill the taxpayers, considering your member representational allowance is literally their money. Those costs were covered by campaign funds, AOC shot back. Oh, were they now? Kennedy produced yet another piece of paper. Because I'm holding your official MRA spending report right here in my hand. And look at that. There they are. Juan D. Gonzalez with the Bombazo Dance Company. Unless there happens to be another Juan D. Gonzalez showing you how to sidestep campaign finance laws. He whipped out still another document. But this is where things get truly fascinating. We couldn't track down a single Juan D. Gonzalez listed as a campaign vendor in any system. There's absolutely no record of the Bombazo Dance Company ever providing political training. What we did discover is a Juan Gonzalez, no middle initial, who teaches salsa in Queens and brags on Instagram about instructing famous faces and politicians. Kennedy locked eyes with AOC. Do you know how this appears? It looks like you spent public funds on dance classes and tried to mask it as training. Back home, we have a name for that. Fraud. F-R-A-U-D. Even us country folks can manage that spelling. This is just absurd, AOC snapped. You're obsessing over pennies while pocketing millions from big oil. Millions, you say? Kennedy asked with a calm tone. Let me just verify that. He put on a performance of checking his phone, acting a bit clumsy with it. Per Open Secrets, that's the neutral group monitoring campaign cash. I've taken in $247,000 from energy firms throughout my whole time in the Senate. That covers 6 years. You've only been in Congress for 4, yet you've already racked up $885,000 in shady tax transfers. $6,000 to your boyfriend, and now taxpayer-funded dance lessons. At the pace you're going, you'll out-corrupt me by, let's see, next Tuesday. The room fell completely silent, save for the clicking of keys from the reporters. But we aren't through just yet, Kennedy remarked, flipping to a new page in his file. Let's discuss the Committee to Protect Medicare. I've never even heard of them. Me neither. However, they dropped $93,000 on Facebook ads to boost your campaign. But here's the kicker. They aren't actually registered as a political committee. They're a 501c4 social welfare group. That's dark money, Congresswoman. The exact thing you say you're against. He pulled out copies of the Facebook advertisements. These ads didn't explicitly say vote for AOC, since that would be against the law. Instead, they said, call Congress and thank AOC for her fight for Medicare. It's the same result, just technically within the rules. A gray area, as your buddy Mr. Chakrabarty might put it. I have no control over what external groups decide to do, AOC began. True, but you could certainly turn down their help, Kennedy shot back. You could call them out. You could give back donations from anyone tied to them. Did you do a single one of those things? Let me see. Nope. No. And definitely not. In fact, you actually tweeted, here it is. Grateful to everyone fighting to save health care. That very same day, They poured $50,000 into ads just for you. He reclined in his seat, observing her with those seemingly gentle eyes. Do you know what really gets to me about this whole situation? It's not actually the money. Lord knows, $885,000 could put food on the table for many families back in Louisiana. It's the blatant hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. That's how you spell hypocrite, just in case you're keeping track. You sit there with your massive social media following, acting like you're above it all, but you're stuck in the same mud as everyone else. You just give it a fresh coat of green paint and call it a revolution. That's like slapping lipstick on a pig and calling it a beauty queen. The point might look a bit nicer, but it's still heading right back to the wallow. Kennedy shut the second part of his file. Back home, we say, that dog won't hunt and that boat definitely won't float. Your holier-than-thou performance regarding money and power. That dog's long gone, and that boat is sitting at the bottom of the swamp. AOC's Instagram Live numbers had dipped under 1.5 million. The live chat had shifted from praise to doubt, then straight into hostility. She's a total fake. Dance classes on our dime. Rules for everyone else, but not for her. Now then, Kennedy said, grabbing the third part of his folder. Shall we discuss the Met Gala? Because that is a completely different story. And this situation, Congresswoman, smells absolutely rotten. Kennedy lifted the iconic photo of AOC at the gala. Her white gown by Aurora James had "Tax the Rich" splashed across the back in bright red letters. He inspected it like an art critic looking at a really smug piece of modern sculpture. Now this, he drawled, this is truly something. Demanding we tax the rich while wearing a dress that costs more than a month's salary for most folks, at a party with $35,000 tickets. It's like sporting a Save the Whales shirt at a seafood buffet. The irony is so heavy you could cut it with a saw. AOC raised her chin with a look of defiance. It was meant to be a political statement. I was there as a guest of the museum. A guest? Kennedy asked, sounding genuinely amused. How nice. I get invited to events all the time, too. Just last week, the local Rotary Club had me over for a fish fry. I made sure to bring my own fish, though. It never crossed my mind to let someone else foot the bill while I preached to them about redistributing their wealth. He then produced a document officially stamped by the House Ethics Committee. But let's talk about this invitation. According to the report, you accepted a dress worth $10,000, $800 shoes, a $2,200 handbag, and jewelry totaling around $3,500. And that's just the outfit. We haven't even mentioned the hair, makeup, or the car ride over yet. The dress was just borrowed, AOC cut in. Borrowed? Kennedy echoed, rolling the word around in his mouth. That's certainly a creative way to describe it. Usually, when a neighbor lends me their lawnmower, I actually return it. Did you return that dress? Let's see here. No, you actually kept it. Truth is, you even had the thing framed. That's not what I'd call borrowing. That's just keeping it. We have a specific word for taking something and never returning it. But I'm far too polite to say it in front of a crowd like this. He pulled out yet another piece of paper. Now here is where things get truly fascinating. The House ethics rules clearly state that members of Congress are forbidden from accepting any gift over $50. $50. Yet, your entire ensemble was worth over $15,000. That isn't just stretching the rules. That's smashing them like a piñata at a kid's birthday party. I was attending in my official capacity, she argued. Official capacity, you say? Kennedy raised his eyebrows in disbelief. Was there some kind of legislative vote happening on the Met Gala dance floor? Were you busy crafting laws in between sips of champagne? Because based on these photos, he said, revealing several more shots, it looks like you were just snapping selfies with stars and enjoying a meal that costs more than a week's pay for a minimum wage worker. He nudged his reading glasses and squinted at a new document. Speaking of bills, let's discuss when you actually got around to paying for all this. The report shows that not a single dime was paid until after the investigation was already underway. That was 2 whole years later. In those 2 years, I've seen glaciers move faster than you reached for your checkbook. There was just some confusion over who was supposed to pay, she explained. Confusion? Kennedy pondered for a second. Well, ethics can be a tricky thing. Like, should I accept thousands of dollars in freebies? Should I actually pay my own bills? I guess these are complicated issues up in New York. Back in Louisiana, we keep things a bit simpler. If it isn't yours and you can't pay for it, you just don't take it. He produced a printed email thread. But wait, it gets even better. These emails between your team and the vendors show they were practically begging for their money. Your makeup artist wrote, and I'm quoting here, "It's been 6 months. I have bills to pay. Please get back to me." Then your chief of staff replied, "Stop calling us, or we'll report you for harassment." A collective gasp swept through the room. Even the Democrats on the panel started looking uneasy. Harassment, Kennedy echoed. Apparently, asking to get paid for a job well done is now considered harassment. That's like claiming the bank is harassing you when they ask for the mortgage. But, I suppose, in the world of socialist economics, maybe that's just how things are done. He held up another picture from the gala. Now let's talk about the company you were keeping. Here you are rubbing elbows with the CEO of Goldman Sachs. And here's a shot with a hedge fund billionaire. Oh, and this one is my personal favorite. You with 3 oil company execs. The very same people you claim are ruining the earth. But I guess they're fine when they're passing you champagne and canapes. I was there to make a point, she insisted. Oh, you definitely made a point. I'll give you that much, Kennedy replied. The point you made was that rules are only for the little people, because that's exactly how this looks. You wore a dress that screamed, "Tax the rich," while you were mingling with the elite, taking their gifts, and stiffing the working-class people who did your hair and makeup. He reached for a financial disclosure document. But hold on, there is even more to this story. Like those late-night TV ads say, let's talk about your boyfriend, Mr. Roberts, once again. He snagged a free ticket, too, along with a $400 bow tie and those $800 shoes. Who in their right mind spends $800 on shoes? For that kind of money, those shoes ought to come with their own chauffeur. Significant others are traditionally invited to these things, she noted. Traditionally, Kennedy nodded. It's also traditional for me to actually pay for myself. But since you're such a fan of transparency, let's talk about that for a second. How long did it take you to get back to the Ethics Committee when they asked for records on the Met Gala? Let me see here. It took 4 months. And what exactly did you hand over? Documents that were almost entirely blacked out. There was black marker on every page. It looked more like a top-secret CIA file than a simple party invite. He produced one last document. The committee also discovered you've been to several other events, just like this one. There was the Vanity Fair Oscar party in L.A., where taxpayers had to foot the bill for your flight. And the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where you accepted another designer dress for free, not to mention that charity gala out in the Hamptons. I didn't realize socialists actually hung out in the Hamptons. I figured you all just met up in community gardens to swap organic turnips. A wave of uneasy laughter swept through the hearing room. AOC's expression shifted from pale to bright red and back again. "But this is the part I love most," Kennedy added, holding up a printed tweet. "The day after the Met Gala, you posted that Republicans were losing it just because you attended a high-end party. They just can't handle a working-class woman of color getting an invite. Working-class congresswoman, you're pulling in $174,000 annually. You're living in a high-end luxury apartment. You're wearing $15,000 outfits to galas. If you're considered working class, then I must be a runway model." He produced one last document from that part of the folder. The Ethics Committee found, and I quote, "Representative Ocasio-Cortez broke House rules by taking forbidden gifts and not disclosing them correctly. They suggested a formal reprimand and ordered you to undergo ethics training." Ethics training? That's about as useful as giving a fish swimming lessons. Yet, they claimed there was no proof of actual corruption, no evidence of corruption. Kennedy stared at her over the rim of his glasses. "Congresswoman, you accepted $15,000 in gifts, only paid for them once you were caught, and then hid behind red tape. Back where I'm from, that isn't just plain corruption. That's corruption served with a side of ego and hypocrisy for dessert." He shut the third part of his folder. "You want to know what really gets to me about this? It's not the glitzy parties or the designer clothes. It's that you pulled all this off while posting about how tough it is to pay rent in D.C., while the people you represent in the Bronx and Queens are struggling to buy food. You're scoring free designer gowns and $35,000 tickets. That's like Marie Antoinette telling the poor to just eat cake. Except Marie Antoinette probably settled her tabs on time. You left working folks like makeup artists, stylists, and drivers hanging while you rubbed elbows with billionaires. That isn't democratic socialism. That's just classic elitism, dressed up with an Instagram filter." AOC's phone screen had cut out. It seemed her staff had stopped trying to save the live stream. The last time anyone checked, the viewer count was under 800,000 and dropping rapidly. "She's all hat and no cattle," Kennedy remarked, using one of his go-to phrases. "A big hat that says, 'Tax the rich.' No cattle, because she's too busy hanging out with them to actually get anything done." He reached for the fourth part of his folder. "Now, should we get into those dance lessons? Because I've been wondering, did the taxpayers at least get a decent salsa show for their cash?" Kennedy pulled out a tablet, shocking everyone who thought he couldn't handle anything more high-tech than a flip phone, and hooked it up to the room's monitors. After a bit of fumbling that could have been real or just for show, a spreadsheet popped up on the screen. "Now I have to confess," he started, leaning back in his seat like someone about to tell a classic tale. "When I first laid eyes on these bills, I thought my team had messed something up. Dance lessons. Surely no one in Congress would bill the taxpayers to learn the cha-cha. That'd be like making them pay for my swimming lessons. And believe me, nobody wants to witness that." Anxious laughs echoed through the chamber. AOC sat perfectly still, her hands balled into fists under the table. "But then I took a better look." Kennedy went on, pointing out a specific line on the spreadsheet. "November 15th, 2024, $850 paid to Juan D. Gonzalez for constituent services training. That is certainly one way to put it. Were you learning how to help your voters through the art of dance? Because down in Louisiana, we usually just pick up the phone." He clicked over to another file. "December 3rd, 2024. Another $1,850 to Mr. Gonzalez for community engagement prep." Community engagement. That's a fancy name, like calling a trash collector a sanitation engineer. The work is identical, but it sounds a lot more prestigious. Those were perfectly valid training costs. AOC cut in. Oh, I'm sure they were, Kennedy agreed with a smile. Just like it's legitimate that Mr. Juan D. Gonzalez, who you claimed wasn't in any vendor records, has an Instagram where he posts videos of himself teaching salsa to New York's elite, including politicians and celebrities. Here is a screenshot of it. The screen displayed a post of a man in a studio with the caption, "Another fantastic session with my student from Congress. Remember, your tax dollars are hard at work." Salsa Life, DC dancing. The hearing room went wild. Even the Democrats seemed stunned. Now, he took this post down about an hour after my team spotted it, Kennedy pointed out. But the internet lasts forever, just like herpes or a terrible credit score. Once it hits the web, it's there for good. He brought up one more document. But wait, it actually gets even better. Take the Bombazo Dance Company, the one you claimed didn't exist. As it turns out, they definitely exist. They just aren't a political training firm. In reality, they are a wedding entertainment service. According to their own website, they specialize in, and I'm quoting here, turning your special day into a celebration of movement and passion. I demand to know exactly how you found their website, Kennedy asked with mock innocence. It's public information, Congresswoman. Google.com. Even I've figured out how to use that one. I did have to get my grandson to show me how the bookmark thingy works, though. He's the one who kept digging through more documents. Now, here is what I find truly baffling. Your official representational allowance, which is taxpayer money for official business, shows $850 paid to Bombazo for a staff development workshop. But Bombazo's own invoice, which they accidentally posted on their Facebook page, lists 5 private bachata lessons for one Ocasio-Cortez. "Bachata!" Kennedy cried out with genuine delight. "Isn't that a Dominican dance? It's quite sensual, isn't it? There's a lot of hip movement involved. I'm certain that's absolutely vital for conducting oversight hearings. Nothing screams fiscal responsibility, quite like a perfectly executed hip swivel." The gallery was falling into total chaos. Several of AOC's supporters began quietly slipping out. Others just sat there in stunned silence. "But this is where things get truly fascinating," Kennedy continued, bringing up an email. "This message went from your scheduler to Juan Gonzalez. It says the Congresswoman needs to move her lesson to 3 o'clock p.m. She apparently had a Ways and Means meeting at 2 o'clock. So you were actually blowing off committee meetings just to take dance lessons. That's like a firefighter abandoning a burning building to go practice the tango." "This is nothing but character assassination," AOC shot back. "Character assassination?" Kennedy mused, weighing the phrase. "No, ma'am. Character assassination is when someone makes things up. This looks a lot more like character suicide. You did this to yourself, after all. I'm simply reading from the receipts." He pulled up yet another document. "Speaking of receipts, let's look at how you attempted to justify these costs. When the House Administration Committee questioned the payments, your office gave a response that is truly remarkable. They claimed the Congresswoman recurs physical conditioning to maintain the stamina needed for her heavy schedule." Kennedy took off his glasses and began cleaning them slowly. Physical conditioning for a 35-year-old who regularly posts Instagram videos of herself doing CrossFit? You apparently needed taxpayer-funded dance classes for stamina. Now, I'm 73, I eat mostly fried food, and I haven't stepped foot in a gym since the Carter administration. But I still managed to show up for work without billing the public for jazzercise. He displayed a series of photos. But let's see exactly what all this training produced. Here is a video from your Instagram, posted December 20th, 2024, showing you dancing at a holiday party. You've got some very nice moves, very professional, almost as if you'd taken lessons. The video began playing on the screen. It showed AOC performing flawless salsa steps at what looked like a high-end Manhattan party. The timing here is very interesting, Kennedy noted. 6 weeks of taxpayer-funded lessons, and suddenly you're dancing like a pro at parties with your millionaire socialist friends. It's like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. Only the cocoon was bought with taxpayer dollars. He pulled up one more financial record. But here's what really gets under my skin. While you were billing the public for dance lessons, your campaign was dropping $4,000 a month on Ubers and Lyfts. You couldn't be bothered to take the subway like your own constituents, but you were happy to take their money for bachata. That is a total mischaracterization. Is it? Kennedy pulled up a local map. The distance from your apartment to the Capitol is just 2.3 miles. The metro line goes straight there. Your constituents ride it every single day. But according to these reports, you took 247 Uber rides in 2024 for trips shorter than 3 miles. The cost to the taxpayers was $8,932. The metro would have cost you maybe $500. The difference is over $8,000. That could buy a whole lot of bachata lessons. He leaned in, his voice becoming much more serious. Do you know what actually bothers me the most about this? It isn't just the money, though $4,550 for dance lessons could feed a struggling family for months. It's the attitude, the sheer sense of entitlement, and the belief that the rules just don't apply to you. You sit there tweeting about how Republicans don't care about the working class, while you're spending that same working class's money on salsa lessons. You preach to us about privilege while living like a princess on the public's dime. That isn't progressivism. That is just good old-fashioned grifting with a socialist hashtag. Kennedy pulled out one last document for this section. The Committee on House Administration has now referred these expenses to the Ethics Committee for a full investigation. They are especially interested in whether or not you filed false vouchers. By the way, that is a federal crime. It carries a penalty of 5 years in prison per count. Now, how's that for a dance with real consequences? Every bit of color had completely drained from AOC's face. Her phone sat silent on the table, that Instagram Live long since forgotten. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still going to root around in the mud, Kennedy concluded. You can try to call dance classes constituent training, but it's still just fraud. And you can pretend to be a woman of the people, but when you're living it up on their dime, people are going to notice. He closed the 4th section of his folder and gave it a thoughtful look. You know, I've been saving the best part for the very end. Should we have a little chat about your carbon footprint? Because for someone who claims the world is ending in 12 years, you sure do burn through a lot of jet fuel. The hearing room went completely silent. AOC looked like she might bolt for the exit. But with the cameras rolling and reporters watching, she was stuck. She was cornered, and Kennedy was just getting started. Don't you worry, he added with that gentle smile of his. This is the final section. Then you can head back to Twitter and explain how this was all just some big right-wing plot. Though you might want to polish that story on your next Uber ride, since I hear the metro is pretty unreliable. Kennedy pulled out a heavy folder labeled Environmental Impact Analysis and set it on the table like a preacher handling a Bible. He looked at AOC with a face of grandfatherly concern that didn't quite hide the sharp gleam in his eyes. Now, Congresswoman, he began, his voice taking on a more philosophical tone, I've been chewing on something you mentioned. The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't tackle climate change. That's scary stuff. Makes me want to do my part. So, I started looking into my own carbon footprint. Do you know what I discovered? He produced a simple chart. My 2024 carbon footprint was 15.2 tons of CO2. That's a bit over the American average of 12 tons. Not exactly great. But that's what happens when you like boudin and have to drive around to find the good stuff. But then I thought, let me check yours, for a little inspiration. I figured I'd learn from the expert. The screen displayed a professional study featuring the MIT logo. So I had some bright minds at MIT, the same ones who analyzed your Green New Deal, calculate your 2024 carbon footprint based on public records, flight logs, and social media posts. Want to take a guess at what they found? AOC stayed silent, her jaw tight. 287 tons, Kennedy announced, letting the number hang in the air. 287 tons of CO2. That is 19 times what the average American produces. That isn't just a footprint. That is a crater. If carbon were oil, you would be Saudi Arabia. He clicked to the next slide to show a breakdown. Let's see where all this carbon is actually coming from. First up, air travel. According to flight tracking data, public info anyone can look up, here is the count. You took 47 flights on private jets in 2024. 47. That is almost one every single week. I didn't realize there were even that many climate conferences to go to. The screen showed a map covered in red lines zigzagging across the country. New York to Los Angeles for a fundraiser. 5.2 tons of CO2. New York to Miami for a speaking gig. 2.8 tons. Oh, and here is my personal favorite. New York to Boston. That is only 190 miles. You hopped on a private jet for a trip that only takes 3 hours by train. That's like taking a helicopter out to your mailbox. Those flights were strictly for official business. Official business, you say? Kennedy pulled out a printout of a social media post. This is your Instagram from that Miami trip. You are sitting right there on the beach, with a caption that reads, "Sometimes a revolutionary needs a break." That counts as official? What were you doing, conducting oversight on sandcastle construction? He flipped through a few more slides. But let's talk about your lifestyle in New York. Per your own financial disclosures, you maintain 2 homes, one in D.C. and one in New York. Your D.C. apartment, according to building records, uses an average of 3,500 kilowatt-hours every month. The average American household uses about 877. You are using 4 times more electricity than a normal family. But here is the real kicker, he continued, pulling up the utility records. Your thermostat settings, which we got from a maintenance report, are quite interesting. Your building's public filings show that you keep your apartment at 68 degrees in the summer and 75 in the winter. You are cooling it down more in the summer than you are heating it in the winter. That is like wearing a parka in July and a bikini in January. It makes about as much sense as your economic policies do. AOC tried to jump in, but Kennedy just kept rolling. Then there is transportation, he said, clicking over to a new slide. We already talked about your Uber addiction, but let's add it all up. 247 short Uber rides just in D.C. Your own staff confirmed you do not even own a bicycle. You were photographed exactly 1 time on the metro, the day after you were elected. That one photo has been doing a lot of heavy lifting for 4 years now. He pulled out yet another analysis. MIT found that your ground-based travel alone, all those Ubers and the occasional limo, pumped out 8.7 tons of CO2 in 2024. Do you know what has a smaller footprint? A soccer mom in a minivan hauling her kids to practice day in and day out. But I suppose saving the earth doesn't mean you actually have to rub elbows with the peasants. This comparison is just absurd. Is it? Kennedy shot back. Let me show you something truly fascinating. He pulled up a specific tweet. In January 2024, you posted, "Everyone must look at their own consumption habits. The planet's future depends on personal responsibility." Personal responsibility. That is quite a statement coming from someone with the carbon footprint of an entire industrial nation. He clicked over to another slide showing a massive estate. This is right from your Instagram stories. You captioned it, "Weekend Getaway." That is a 6,000 square foot mansion in the Hamptons. Public records reveal it rents for $10,000 a week. But let's talk about the emissions. Just heating that house for your weekend generates more CO2 than a minimum wage worker produces in a whole year. Yet they supposedly need to examine their consumption habits. The screen then showed more receipts. These are restaurant bills taken from your FEC filings. A $400 dinner at STK Steakhouse. That's the spot that flies its beef all the way from Japan. Do you have any idea what the carbon cost is of flying steak across the Pacific? A single one of your dinners causes more emissions than an entire family of 4 generates in a month. But wait, Kennedy said, his voice heavy with sarcastic excitement. There is even more. Your own Instagram places you at 15 different international climate summits in 2024. Davos, Switzerland, Paris, France, Dubai. Now, those are some curious locations for a climate conference. Every trip was via private jet. Every hotel was a luxury suite, and every meal was 5-star. He displayed a photo from Davos. Here you are, standing with Greta Thunberg. She spent 32 hours on a train just to avoid flying. You took a Gulf Stream that guzzles 500 gallons of fuel every hour. That is like walking into an AA meeting with a beer bong. Climate action demands global coordination. Global coordination. Kennedy chuckled, wondering if that's what they're calling champagne and caviar now, because this receipt from Davos shows you dropped $100 on dinner for 2. At those prices, the fish really should have swam to Switzerland on their own. He brought up a detailed comparison chart. Let's put all this into perspective. Your 287 tons of CO2 is the same as driving 61 cars for a year. It's 152,000 pounds of coal burned, or 35 homes' energy usage for a year. Or, and this is my personal favorite, it's the total lifetime carbon footprint of 3.5 average Guatemalans, their entire lives. But please, do tell us more about environmental justice. The real problem is systemic change. Systemic change, Kennedy echoed. You're right. Let's overhaul the system where politicians cruise on private jets while lecturing us on poverty. Let's fix the system where you tweet about rising sea levels from a luxury beachfront resort. Let's change the system where saving the planet means you save it while I party. He produced one last document. This is from your book, Taking on the Climate Crisis, Chapter 3. You wrote, "We all have to make sacrifices. The future of humanity depends on how we change our lives today." Such beautiful words. Inspiring. I especially loved the part where you made the sacrifice of flying first class instead of private that one single time. What bravery! Kennedy slammed his folder shut with authority. You know what your real problem is, Congresswoman? You think the rules are only for everyone else. It's conservation for you, but never for me. Sacrifice is for the masses, but not for the socialist royalty. You're like a firefighter who moonlights as an arsonist on the weekends. Sure, you talk a big game about stopping the blaze, but you're the one holding the match. He leaned back, observing her with those sharp, shrewd eyes. "The higher the monkey climbs, the more of its backside you see," he finally remarked. "You've climbed pretty high on that environmental pedestal. But from where we're sitting, we can all see what you truly are. A hypocrite with a private jet and a social media account." AOC's hands were shaking. Her phone was lighting up with dozens of missed calls. Her staff had completely cleared out from the back of the room. The Instagram Live had cut out long ago, but the hashtags were trending everywhere. OC, hypocrite, hash, jet-setting socialist, hash, rules for thee. "I'll tell you what," Kennedy said, his voice suddenly softening to an almost kind tone. "I'm going to give you some free advice. And it's worth exactly what you're paying for it. The next time you feel like lecturing Americans about their carbon footprint, maybe try taking the train. Next time you want to preach about consumption, maybe pass on the $1,200 dinner. And the next time you set out to save the world, maybe start with your own behavior." He collected his files slowly and deliberately, because, as it stands, you're about as eco-friendly as an oil spill, as genuine as a $3 bill, and as socialist as a bonus check from Goldman Sachs. The only thing green about your New Deal is the cash you're burning and the envy you're peddling. The hearing room went wild the second Chairman Graham's gavel slammed down. AOC bolted to her feet, her chair screeching across the floor like fingernails on a chalkboard. Her face flashed through anger, shame, and panic before locking into a look of pure defiance. "This was a setup," she hissed, her hands trembling as she grabbed her phone. "A coordinated hit," she added, pointing at Kennedy, who was nonchalantly tidying his files. "You're nothing but a fossil fuel shill running a rigged show trial." Kennedy glanced up with a calm expression. "A show trial? Not quite, ma'am. This felt more like a game of show and tell. I brought the evidence, and you brought the lies. It's really that simple." AOC tried to make a dramatic exit, but a wave of reporters surged forward and blocked her path. Microphones jutted out like spears as a chorus of overlapping voices began shouting, "Congresswoman, can you justify the dance lessons on the taxpayer's dime? Are you planning to reimburse the public? How do you explain those 287 tons of carbon emissions? Will you be resigning from the climate caucus?" She shoved past them in silence, her remaining staff forming a protective wall around her. Just before hitting the door, she spun around for one final jab. "This isn't the end, Kennedy. The public sees right through your act." Kennedy was already on his feet, chatting casually in Spanish with the janitor. He looked over at her parting shot. "Oh, I'm with you. We're far from finished. That was only the first chapter." He tapped another thick file sitting on the desk. "Volume 2 breaks down your crypto portfolio. I didn't think socialists were into Bitcoin, but these blockchain logs make for a wild read." AOC bolted. The press swarmed Kennedy like a cloud of locusts, but he simply waved them off. "Y'all are gonna make me late for my lunch. There's a truck outside with the best pupusas you'll find anywhere near the Capitol. Is anyone else hungry? Lunch is on me." As he strolled toward the exit with the media in tow, he pulled out an old flip phone and squinted. "Look at that, 17 missed calls. Either the world is ending or my wife realized I forgot the garbage again." "Senator," one reporter pressed, "how do you respond to claims that this was just a political hit job?" Kennedy stopped and thought for a second, saying, "You know my roots. We have a saying back home. If you don't want people to know you're drunk, don't go dancing on the bar." The Congresswoman has been dancing on that bar for 4 years, metaphorically. And given those receipts, quite literally, I just finally turned the lights on. Meanwhile, out in the hall, AOC's comms director was in full crisis mode, typing furiously on several phones. The backlash on Twitter was brutal under the socialist rose tag. I sent AOC $500 last year while I was skipping meals. Turns out she blew it on dance classes at Bronx Native back in 2019. My mother takes 3 buses to work, yet AOC claims she can't use the subway. I'm officially done with this fake. Climate Warrior 2020 mentioned 287 tons of CO2. I quit eating meat and bike everywhere while she's out here flying private jets. This is honestly devastating. The mainstream networks were having a field day with the story. CNN's ticker blared, AOC's carbon footprint 19 times higher than average American. Fox News went with, Socialist Princess exposed as massive climate hypocrite. Even MSNBC was struggling to find a positive angle. Serious questions are being asked about the spending habits of progressive leaders. Back inside, Kennedy was still holding court with the press and the cleaning crew. Someone had grabbed the pupusas, and he was describing the difference between the Salvadoran and Honduran styles like a professional food critic. Senator, another journalist cut in, AOC has over 8 million followers on Twitter. Aren't you worried about the blowback? Kennedy chewed his food thoughtfully. 8.7 million? That's quite a crowd. You know what's even more impressive, though? The cold, hard truth. My grandpappy used to say, you can fool people with your tweets, but you can't tweet your way out of the truth. He took a brief pause. Actually, he never said that. He passed away before Twitter existed, but I know he would have said it. He was a sharp man like that. Suddenly, his phone started buzzing. The old-school flip phone was blaring a MIDI version of Sweet Home Alabama. He fumbled with the buttons until he finally got it open. Hello? Yes, honey. No, I didn't forget the trash. Well, I actually did, but then I remembered later. No, I'm not just making that up. Yes, I saw what happened on the news. No, she didn't quite cry. She came close, though. Pupusas? They're a bit like gorditas, but different. Yes, I'll bring some home for you. He snapped the phone shut and turned back to the crowd. 27 years of marriage, and she still doesn't trust me with the garbage. But since she trusts me to root out fraud in the Senate, I suppose it all evens out. Over on social media, the meltdown was only getting worse. The down hashtag had already cleared 2 million mentions. Her Instagram following was tanking so quickly that someone launched a website with a real-time counter. The Socialist Democratic Party was in total crisis mode as members started distancing themselves, starting with Senator Sanders. I have always maintained that we must practice what we preach when it comes to climate change. I was deeply disappointed to learn about these latest revelations. As Ilhan Omar put it, the movement is far bigger than any one person. We have a responsibility to hold ourselves to the very highest standards. Even the squad was beginning to fracture. Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush released identical statements saying they needed time to review the troubling allegations. Only Jamal Bowman offered a weak defense of her. He suggested we should focus on systemic issues instead of individual actions. It was a tweet he ended up deleting after just an hour of getting absolutely destroyed in the comments. By that evening, the final numbers were in. Instagram had lost 1 million followers. Twitter was down by 890,000 followers. TikTok had dropped a massive 3-2 million followers. Gen Z took the news of the climate hypocrisy particularly hard. Donors are already demanding refunds, totaling $1.2 million and counting. 3 of her staff members resigned right on Twitter, not even bothering with formal resignation letters. Her chief of staff was even spotted at Reagan National booking a one-way flight to California. Meanwhile, Kennedy had made his way back to his office, where he found his team watching the coverage with grins they could barely hide. Did you catch her face when you brought up the cryptocurrency? His chief of staff asked. Kennedy nodded as he settled into his worn-out leather chair. She looked like a crawfish caught in the headlights. The poor thing never even saw it coming. Pride comes before the fall, and she had enough pride to fill an entire warehouse. What's actually inside that cryptocurrency folder? Kennedy gave a little smile. Oh, that's mostly just recipes for etouffee. There might be a few Bitcoin receipts showing she bought $50,000 worth during the pandemic, while tweeting that crypto was a capitalist scam, but it's mainly recipes. My cousin over in Lafayette makes the best etouffee you've ever tasted. His communications director looked a bit worried. Senator, her fans are getting pretty heated. We're receiving some really nasty messages. Kennedy just shrugged. Let 'em holler. You can't make everyone happy. If you try, you'll end up like the Congresswoman, saying one thing, doing another, and fooling nobody but yourself. As the sun set over Washington, one final scene played out. In her office, AOC sat all alone, her phone dark and her staff long gone. The Tax the Rich dress hung in the corner, draped in dry-cleaning plastic, a $10,000 reminder of pride before the fall. On her desk, amid the mess of abandoned talking points and crisis plans, lay a single manila folder. Someone from Kennedy's office had delivered it. The label read, "To Cryptocurrency and Other Investments." There was a sticky note attached to it. Congresswoman, I thought you might want to get out in front of this one. My grandkids tell me Bitcoin is confusing, but those blockchain records definitely aren't. P.S. The password for your Coinbase account probably shouldn't be TaxTheric 2019. Just a suggestion. J.K. She opened the folder with hands that were visibly trembling. The first page showed a blockchain analysis of wallet addresses linked to her LLC. The transactions were all right there, permanent and undeniable. That $50,000 investment had grown to $400,000 during the pandemic, and the capital gains taxes were conspicuously left unpaid. The revolution, it seemed, would not be televised after all. Instead, it had been live-streamed, fact-checked, and completely dismantled by a 73-year-old man with a flip phone and a love for folksy sayings. As Kennedy had said at the end of the hearing, you can't polish a turd, but you can certainly roll it in glitter and call it progressive policy. The glitter had finally rubbed off. All that remained was the cold, hard truth. And that truth, as it turned out, came with a distinct Louisiana accent. 1 week later, the shockwaves were still rolling through Washington like ripples in a bayou after someone tosses in a stick of dynamite. The House Ethics Committee had opened formal investigations into both the dance expenses and the Met Gala violations. The IRS had also taken an interest in the cryptocurrency revelations, which is government speak for "you're in serious trouble." 3 different U.S. attorneys' offices were reviewing the allegations of campaign finance fraud. AOC had gone into hiding, canceling every single public appearance. Her final tweet, posted at 3:00 a.m., after what looked like a wine-soaked desperation session, read, "The establishment will always try to destroy those who challenge power. I will not be silenced." That post was ratioed into oblivion, with 50,000 angry replies to just 3,000 likes. The financial bleeding just wouldn't stop. Act Blue reported that donations to her campaign had cratered by 94%. Her merchandise store, selling everything from Tax the Rich hoodies to Green New Deal totes, had shut down after processing $80,000 in refunds. The DCCC had quietly removed her from their list of featured speakers, but perhaps the most devastating blow came from her very own district. The Bronx Times didn't hold back, running a scathing editorial called The Princess of Propaganda that exposed how she'd ditched her home district for the glitz of LA and Miami. Meanwhile, a local group known as Bronx Residents for Honest Representation had already filed the paperwork to back a primary challenger. Kennedy, on the other hand, had headed back home to Louisiana for the weekend. A reporter tracked him down at his favorite fishing hole, a serene spot on the Bayou Teche where the towering cypress trees felt like a natural cathedral. "Senator, do you have any thoughts on the situation with AOC?" Kennedy kept his eyes fixed on his fishing line. "You see, fishing is all about learning a little patience. You can't force the fish to bite. You just put the bait out there honestly and wait your turn. That Congresswoman, she was all flash and no substance. She made a massive scene, scared all the fish away, and then couldn't figure out why her bucket was empty. Do you feel any guilt about ending her political career?" Kennedy finally looked up, appearing completely baffled. "End her career, son? I didn't end a single thing. All I did was hold up a mirror for her. If she didn't care for the reflection, well, that's between her and the Almighty. I just read the receipts out loud. But what about the personal attacks?" "Personal attacks, you say?" Kennedy let out a soft chuckle. "She went on Instagram and called me a crawfish-eating hillbilly fossil in front of 3 million people. I presented cold, hard evidence of potential fraud to a Senate committee. Now, which one of those feels personal to you?" Suddenly, his line gave a little tug. Kennedy turned his focus to reeling in what looked like a pretty decent-sized catfish. He took a second to admire it before carefully letting it slide back into the water. "See that?" he remarked. "Catch and release. There's no need to destroy everything you hook." The Congresswoman could have just owned up to it, apologized, and promised to do better. Instead, she chose to double down on it all. That's exactly where confidence ends and arrogance begins. Confidence can admit when it's made a mistake. Arrogance just points the finger at everyone else. Back in D.C., the Democratic caucus was scrambling in full-blown damage control mode. A leaked recording from their emergency meeting showed pure panic over the AOC contagion. Multiple members were desperately double-checking their own expense reports, terrified of getting Kennedy'd. The term had already become a staple in the political dictionary. To Kennedy, someone meant dismantling an opponent using their own record, delivered with a mix of folksy charm and surgical precision. Political consultants were already charging top dollar to teach their clients how to avoid that fate. The final bombshell dropped on Friday afternoon. The FBI confirmed they were officially looking into campaign finance violations, specifically that $885,000 moved through a web of PACs and LLCs. Legal pros noted that if she were convicted, AOC could be looking at up to 5 years in federal prison for every count. Her attorney put out a statement claiming the whole thing was a misunderstanding and that they were fully cooperating. Translation: they were busy cutting a plea deal. Kennedy's chief of staff called him down in Louisiana to break the news. "That's a real shame," Kennedy replied, sounding honestly disappointed. "Prison isn't a place I'd wish on anyone. Maybe they'll let her lead dance classes for the other inmates. Lord knows she's had plenty of practice with that." "What about Volume 2? The crypto evidence? The crypto stuff? Oh, just file that away for now. There's no sense in kicking someone when they're already down. My mama raised me better than to do that. Besides, I think the young lady has finally learned her lesson. You can't save the world if you can't even save yourself from your own ego." As the sun dipped below the bayou horizon, Kennedy started packing up his gear. Tomorrow, he'd be flying back to D.C. in coach, taking a middle seat if that's what it took. He was going back to do the people's work, far away from Instagram live sessions or Twitter rants. Because, as he'd mentioned to that reporter, real change doesn't come from a follower count or a viral clip. It comes from the truth told plainly and work done honestly. "You can fool some people with your Twitter," he mumbled to himself, tossing his tackle box into the bed of his 10-year-old truck. "But you sure can't tweet your way out of the truth." That crawfish-eating hillbilly had come out on top, not because he was slicker or had more money, but because he understood something the Instagram generation had completely forgotten. In the end, the truth always floats to the top, even in the murkiest bayou.